Hey everyone, today's video is going to be a little bit of a different one. A few weeks ago, I went and fished a Fly Fishing Team USA qualifier for the Western region. It was held at Six Lakes Resort over near Duchesne, and it was a bank fishing competition. So filming wasn't really the focus for me for this event, but I did strap a GoPro on to record everything I did. So in this video, I'm just going to kind of recap the event, go through my decision making at each lake and each beat, some of the rigs I chose to fish, how I ended up catching some of my fish, and you'll just see the highs and lows of the first day of this event. It was a 2-day event, and this video will cover day 1. If you want to see more information about this event, you can click down on the link in the description and it will take you to the event page you see on the screen. But anyway, let's get into lake number 1. To start, I was going to be on Duck Lake. We had a field of 8 since we had a few drops at the last minute, so we were broken into 2 groups of 4. We'd be fishing each beat for 45 minutes and rotating. We'd fish each beat once, so that'd be a total of 3 hours fishing on this lake. Beats 1 and 4 kind of had some shallow weed beds because they were kind of in the corners, and then beats 2 and 3 had a deep bank, essentially, where these were dam beats, so it's just like a straight deep drop. And I drew beat number 3 to start. So here's what beat number 3 looked like. Like I said, we're fishing off a dam, and there's pretty much just chunk rock, a steep bank. There wasn't any weeds or weed beds or any identifiable cover or structure. I'm going to start out with my bait ball here. Get our line stretched out. Got my hover on. So as you can see, we had a little bit of chop on the water. I didn't know whether my bait ball rig was going to be good in these lakes or not. I know they're mostly insect-based, biomass for trout food, but I wanted to see if they'd chase it, target some of the aggressive fish early before we pressure the heck out of them as we rotate. So I'm just trying a bunch of different retrieves and depths with this bait ball rig, but I didn't get a single follower, and I kind of realized early that this just wasn't really going to happen. You can see some hand twist retrieves, and you can see the water got real slick once the sun came up and warmed up a little bit. I'm just kind of checking to see if there were fish following it in, and there weren't. So I was going to fish this for a few minutes, and if I didn't get any followers or in need or anything, I was going to switch out of it pretty quick. This is one of those times I wish I could have pre-fished or practiced a little bit to get an idea of what was in these lakes. But I was able to eliminate this pretty quick. Okay, let's go midge tip. So I went over and picked up my midge tip. This way I could fish a little bit slower, fish something a little more imitative to match the trout food in the lake. I've got a balance leech and a couple chironomids on the triple fly rig. There's a sporadic fish rising, so I was gonna, still try and see if I can figure out a depth they were at and just mess with my retrieves and the pace of my retrieves. The water was slick, so I was thinking it was probably going to be a slow thing. I remember Devin catching one right off the bat, and then I think Nick might have caught a fish in this first beat, but it was really slow, and when it's really slow, it probably means deep and slow. So I pretty much fished this midge tip pretty hard for about 25-30 minutes, and honestly I had no eats on it. I was kind of wondering whether I should put on a quicker sinking line, but I decided to go fish absolutely static and go throw a hopper dropper rig. Had a little chironomid tied on under it. There were a few chironomids about, so I knew they were at least around. Trying to see if I could figure out whether they'd eat something static and suspended. But I kind of just, beats were about, 25 yards wide, so I was kind of just making a cast, fan casting around, trying to see if I can intercept a fish that would be willing to eat my chironomid. After the first 45-minute session, really, I hadn't figured anything out. I didn't really have a clue other than that the fishing was slow and I knew I needed to go grind out, a fish or two and see if I could figure something out. So after the first rotation, I got beat number 4, which was on the far end of the dam. It was pretty much just a shallow, weedy flat. I decided to pull off the balance leech, and I think I put something a little more weight neutral on so I could stay over the top of these weed beds and still work the rig pretty slow. Honestly, the deepest part was maybe 5 or 6 feet deep, but at least I had an idea of the depths I needed to fish because I couldn't fish any deeper than that. There was one little spot that was kind of an edge of a weed bed and had like a little open bowl, and I thought I'd target that because it might be kind of just a lane for some fish to relate to. But I could see into this whole beat. Like the full casting distance, I could see into it. I'm making that same cast because that was into the deepest part of the beat, so I figured there's going to be a fish kind of moving around. That's about where they'd end up. But at this point, I had seen a fish move from my left to my right over these weed beds. It was just kind of cruising lazily. It's a pretty big fish, so I could see it. And I kind of saw its route and figured this fish would follow that route, and I could maybe intercept them with a dry dropper rig. So I took off my chironomid and threw on a little TF glassy midge because it was smaller and a little more imitative. The chironomids that were coming off were, like a size 18 or so. So I just threw my dry dropper rig and let the chironomid sit in the lane I saw the fish feeding, and then this happened.
Here's one. Look at something out, boys. Internet, let's go.
We got a nice little brown trout to eat the TF glassy midge. I'm taking a picture here because that's how we recorded our fish for the comp. I was super happy to get this fish in the net, and I felt like I had figured something out. So I figured that was a way I gotta be fishing in this beat. So I just watched some fish come back and forth, and I had watched a fish move past my chironomid, and I moved it just ever so slightly and saw it turn around. And I had a big rainbow on.
Got it. Big one. Oh, get out of there. Does that count?
Yeah, it counts.
Okay.
Before the bell.
Yeah. Cool.
Yep, so I was just asking Devin there whether the fish counted because I had hooked it right before time was called. But as long as you hook the fish before time's up, then
It's a big one.
you get a chance to get it to the net. This was a really nice bow that ate my chironomid. I was feeling pretty good at this point because I think 2 was tied for the lead right now with Devin and Nick. And I had really felt like I had at least found a way to catch some of these really picky, kind of tough conditions fish. So I was feeling pretty pumped up about this.
We're good, dude. Go, go, go.
So next I was on beat 1, which was another corner beat, and it had some weed beds over kind of a bowl shape. You couldn't cast over the shallowest part of the left side of the beat because I was out of bounds, but you could kind of get a cast on the edge, and that was right on the line. So since I was having success fishing over the weed beds, I was going to target the left and right edge of this bowl and hope I could intercept another cruising fish. I had seen one fish while waiting to get lines in come up on the left side and cruise and do a feeding pass and then back out. But for the first 20 minutes, I was just kind of fan casting around, hoping I could intercept a fish. By now, I believe Devin was on 2, Nick was on 2, and I was just trying to get that third fish so I could have a chance at pulling ahead. I think by now everyone had figured out that dry dropper was the way to go. Everyone was fishing static at this point. It was really the only way to catch fish.
There we go. Three.
So with that fish, I was the first one to 3. I kept trying to repeat the pass and hope I can intercept another feeding fish, but that was it for beat 1 to me. You know, I still feel like we had figured out the right thing to be doing to catch the most fish. So we had one more rotation into, for me, beat number 2. This was another one of those deep, featureless middle dam beats, and I didn't have a ton of confidence here. So I figured I'd maybe throw the moving rig, see if I could figure another something out. I had a 1 fish cushion. During pretty slow fishing, so I was doing a little bit of practicing, but also if I couldn't move anything on the polling rig, then I was going to go back to fishing static on dry dropper. But as you can see, the lake stayed glass the whole time, and by the time I reached this beat, there were 3 other anglers that had been hammering it. Really, I didn't have a ton of confidence on what to do here. If I were looking back on it, I should have just put the maximum legal length dry dropper rig and just fish deep and let a couple of chironomids just soak as deep as I could. Or maybe put one mid column and one deep and have a big spacing in between them. I threw out my dry dropper rig here, but
What was that?
I think I saw the hopper do something unnatural and I wasn't quite sure. It was kind of spinning, so it felt like there were fish swimming by it but not eating it. I mean, it's dead calm. Any little thing's going to influence the hopper above it. So I was getting kind of unsure, and when I saw the hopper spin again, I set, thinking maybe it was a light take, but there was nothing there. Devin ended up managing to catch one more. Nick caught one more, so we all had 3 at the end of session 1. Harry ended up with 1, so there's a 3-way tie in our group for first place. I was feeling pretty good about it. I wish I could have put one more to get a solo first, but I still felt like I had a chance to win the comp after session 1. So session 2 was on Eagle Lake. This lake kicked my butt. Last time I was there, I think I caught two fish on it. 3? I might have caught 3. Anyways, I knew it was deep. It was kind of the same deep middle sections. The far beats kind of had a little bit shallower sections, but they were still pretty deep. I know the other group probably would have beaten the lake up. So I figured I'd go into it and fish how I was catching fish last time I was there, by throwing the midge tip with the balanced leech and a couple of chironomids under it. So beat 2 was one of those middle beats that had some deep water. At least on Eagle Lake, the middle beats have some weed beds that extend pretty far out, so there's enough stuff to draw some fish into the area. I started out with dry dropper. I saw Devin catch a couple fish right away in his first beat, but I couldn't move anything. No indications of fish on dry dropper, so I went to my midge tip setup and threw my balance leech and chironomids over the weed beds, trying to get deep and just moving them slow. But honestly, I didn't feel like I sniffed a fish. I think Harry caught a couple and he was to my left, but nothing during my first beat. Moved on to beat number 3, another middle beat. Same exact thing, some weed beds, some deep water. At this point, I think Harry was into like 3 or 4 fish. Later, I realized he was just fishing a dry dropper, casting it far, and just letting it sit for 5-10 minutes at a time. Honestly, I should have keyed into that, but I just couldn't move a fish. I think I was moving the dry dropper rig too much, or just not getting it deep enough. Something. So I was bouncing around between a midge tip and my dry dropper, but I had not gotten a single eat. So that was, we moved on to beat 3, we moved on to beat 4 in the third rotation. There's some shallow weed beds there, so I initially threw the midge tip here, as you can see over them. You can see Harry catching more fish to my left. But eventually I just realized the midge tip wasn't going to happen for me. I didn't see anyone else catching fish on moving flies. So I was just going to let my dry dropper rig soak out. Then I had my hopper on top and was dropping a couple chironomids off of it. Got to see.
Hate the dry.
So while fighting this, I knew this was a big fish. And I was so determined to get a single fish to the net. Blanking in these competitions is awful. And you need at least one fish to not get the blanking penalties, which essentially last place points to the max. So I just needed to get this fish so bad into the net.
Oh, Jesus.
And I just was having trouble turning it and just getting its head up. It's a big hopper hook in its mouth. See, he's pulling line out and I don't have the fish on the reel, so I'm just trying to strip the line in, get him close enough so I can lift and get him in. So I'm started skating him here, trying to keep his head up, and
No!
I just put way too much pressure on him in the net.
Oh, I should have horsed it.
He popped
That was
off.
bad.
That was awful. I was feeling sick.
Oh. That's stupid.
So at this point, I hadn't gotten any other eats. I was on beat 1, which had shallow weed beds all around and to the left. And I was just going to soak my dry dropper rig, but honestly at this point, I was pretty livid. I was frustrated, disappointed in myself. I knew I shouldn't have done what I did trying to net that fish and should just let it run out. And honestly, I was tired and on tilt, and it was just not happening for me. I wasn't focused. And I ended up blanking for the session. So here's how everything shook out for day 1. I ended up 7th out of 8th. I got first place placement points in a tie with 2 others during the first session. And I got last place blank placement points in session 2. You can see that one fish was the difference between a tie for 4th and 7th. So it cost me quite a bit of qualifying points losing that fish at the net. Again, super frustrating. Devin and Spencer ended up tying for first, and Madoka, who's a super solid fly fisherman herself, took a third. You'll see more of Madoka in day 2. I was in her group. But overall, I was pretty disappointed with how I did, at least with how I fished on the second session. I was glad I got a chance to regroup and was determined to hit day 2 and fish a little better than I did today. Here's a few final thoughts and observations from day 1 that I think stood out to me. One was that Devin, obviously he's one of the top fly fishermen in the world, but one thing he was especially good at doing in each of the sessions was catching the fresh fish in his beat right away. He caught one immediately on Duck Lake and caught two immediately on Eagle Lake. Maximizing those fresh fish is super important, and Devin was great at it. It's pretty much gave him a leg up in each of the two sessions. For me, I felt like I was in the first session, I did a good job of figuring out the correct strategy and correct areas to catch fish. I wish I could have figured something out a little better for those deeper sections. It probably meant going deeper in retrospect, but I was pretty happy with how session 1 shook out. Obviously, session 2 was a huge disappointment. That hopper eat felt like a bonus fish, and I should have capitalized on it, and I didn't. And I just didn't stick with the dry dropper thing, and I should have, and it, really cost me in the end. Again, props to Harry for figuring that out. I feel like I need to get a little bit better. When something's not working, cycling through more stuff to try and really figure out the right way to catch these fish. I just need to when something's not working, I just need to abandon and rotate through stuff until I get more information. I feel like on Eagle Lake, I didn't do a good job of using the eliminate things process to find the right thing, and I just didn't get there. The positive I did take out of day 1 was that in the first session, I got a first place, even though it was a tie. I felt like fishing wise, I could hang around with these comp guys to an extent, and it wasn't a total loss. Just came down to session 2 being a little bit of a grind and difficult for me. Hopefully I can take what I learned in day 1 and apply it to day 2 coming up and all my competitions going forward. Despite the frustration and a little bit of heartbreak, I had a blast. All the guys fishing these comps are good and awesome people. A really fun group to be around. I really enjoyed my time I spent there with all these guys and girls, Madoka. But yeah, I think everything's a learning experience, and this one definitely was for me. Hopefully it's something I can take going forward. If you're not subscribed to the channel, I encourage you to subscribe so you can see day 2. Spoilers, it might go a little bit better. But anyways, thanks guys for watching and dealing with the voiceover crap for this. Hopefully you enjoyed watching this video.
We can make this happen. We got little guys, we can make this happen. Minutes. Let's go. There we go. We can make this happen, guys. We can for sure make this happen. Let's get this guy in the net. With the leech.